This video didn't exist until you observed it. Not philosophically or metaphorically, literally, quantum mechanically. Before your consciousness-focused attention here, this transmission existed as probability wave, as potential across infinite possibilities, as superposition of existing and not existing simultaneously. Your observation collapsed the wave function, selected this specific reality from all possible realities, brought this exact configuration of information into manifestation. You didn't find this video, your observation created it in the act of finding it. This isn't speculation or spiritual philosophy, this is quantum mechanics, the most precisely tested scientific theory in human history, proven correct in billions of experiments, foundational to every technology you use daily. And quantum mechanics reveals something so radical that most people reject it instinctively despite overwhelming evidence. Reality doesn't exist independently of observation. Consciousness doesn't observe pre-existing reality. Consciousness creates reality through the act of observation. You've been feeling this truth lately, haven't you? That strange sense that your attention affects what happens, that reality responds to where you focus, that circumstances organize around your observation in ways that seem impossible yet keep occurring. You've been attributing it to coincidence or pattern recognition because accepting the truth that you're creating reality through observation seems too impossible, too empowering, too far from what you were taught about how existence works. But the evidence is undeniable once you start paying attention. When you expect something, it appears. When you look for patterns, they manifest. When you focus on problems, they multiply. When you direct attention to solutions, they emerge. The correlation between your observation and what manifests isn't coincidence. It's the fundamental mechanism of reality creation that quantum physics has proven, but consensus paradigm refuses to integrate because it demolishes the illusion of objective external reality. Right now, as you read these words, you're not passively receiving information that existed before you arrived. You're actively creating this experience through observation. The quantum field is responding to your consciousness by organizing itself into these exact words, this specific understanding, this particular transmission. Someone else observing this same content experiences different video because their consciousness is collapsing different aspects of probability waves. There's no single objective video existing independently. There are infinite potential videos, and your observation is selecting which one manifests for you. The quantum field doesn't just respond to your observation passively, it anticipates your observation. This video appeared in your reality before you consciously chose to watch it because the field detected your consciousness moving toward readiness for this information and organized circumstances to deliver it at optimal moment. The synchronicity that brought you here wasn't luck. It was quantum field responding to observation you were about to make by preparing reality to contain what you were about to observe. Here's what makes this critical. Most people go through life completely unconscious of their power as observers. They believe reality happens to them rather than through them. They think circumstances are fixed rather than fluid. They assume their observation is passive reception rather than active creation. This unconsciousness creates chaotic manifestation. Reality responding to unconscious observation patterns, manifesting whatever consciousness is randomly focused on without conscious direction. But once you understand observer effect, once you recognize that observation creates rather than discovers, that consciousness collapses probability waves rather than witnessing predetermined outcomes, that attention literally manifests what it focuses on, everything changes. You're not victim of circumstances anymore. You're creator of circumstances through where you direct observation. And that recognition transforms you from powerless observer of external reality to conscious creator through observation itself. You've been experiencing observer effect directly in ways that prove your consciousness is creating reality through observation. even though you've been dismissing these experiences as coincidence or imagination. There have been countless instances where thinking about someone caused them to contact you immediately, not occasionally, but consistently, with timing too precise to be random. This isn't telepathy or psychic connection. This is your observation of that person in consciousness creating probability wave collapse where they think of you simultaneously, which manifests as them reaching out. Your observation doesn't just affect your experience, it affects the reality of everyone entangled with your consciousness. You've noticed that when you expect something to go wrong, it does. And when you expect things to work out, they do. With consistency that makes you wonder if your expectations are creating outcomes rather than predicting them. That's exactly what's happening. Expectation is form of observation. You're observing future probability and collapsing it into specific manifestation through the expectation itself. The field responds to your observation of future by organizing present to create the future you observed. Perhaps most striking is the way information appears exactly when you need it. You wonder about something, and within hours you encounter answer through book, conversation, video, or spontaneous knowing. This isn't coincidence or law of attraction, this is observer effect. Your question creates observation focused on answer, and that observation collapses probability waves where answer exists into your experience reality. The answer was always available as potential, but your observation brought it into manifestation. You've experienced moments where you felt like you were watching your life from outside rather than living it from inside. Observing yourself as if you were character in movie rather than being the character. These moments reveal truth. You're not person experiencing life. You're consciousness observing person experiencing life. And the observation is what creates the experience. When you step back and observe the observer, you recognize that observation is prior to and creative of all experience. There have been instances where reality seemed to glitch or reset. You swear something happened one way, then reality shows it happened differently as if timeline changed. This isn't false memory. This is you perceiving the moment when your observation collapsed different probability wave than it collapsed before, selecting alternate reality from superposition of possibilities. The quantum substrate of reality is constantly being constructed and reconstructed based on observation, and occasionally you catch glimpse of reconstruction occurring. You've noticed that problems you stop focusing on often resolve themselves, while problems you obsess over tend to worsen or multiply. This is direct evidence of observer effect. When you observe problem intensely, you're collapsing probability waves into manifestations of problem. When you withdraw observation, you allow field to collapse into different configurations that may not include problem at all. Your attention is literally manifesting what you focus on. Perhaps most mysterious is the way your presence seems to affect outcomes even when you're not actively doing anything. You enter space and energy shifts. You join conversation and direction changes. You observe situation and possibilities reorganize. This isn't personal magnetism or social influence. This is quantum field responding to your consciousness as observer, reorganizing itself around your observation frequency even before you consciously direct attention to anything specific. There have also been moments of prescience where you knew what was about to happen seconds before it occurred. Not as prediction, but as direct knowing. This is you perceiving probability wave before it collapses, observing the quantum potential before it manifests as physical actuality. The knowing comes from observation occurring at quantum level before manifestation occurs at material level, giving you preview of what your observation is in process of creating. Every moment of your life until now has been training in observation, developing your capacity to recognize that observation creates reality, preparing you for conscious use of observer effect rather than unconscious random manifestation. The training wasn't formal education or deliberate practice. It was life itself showing you repeatedly that reality responds to observation. The times when positive thinking seemed to work weren't placebo effect or self-fulfilling prophecy. They were you discovering observer effect accidentally. When you focused on positive outcomes and they manifested, you were collapsing probability waves through observation directed at desired results. The technique worked not because thoughts are magical, but because observation is creative and thinking is form of observation. The times when positive thinking failed taught you something crucial. Observer effect responds to actual observation, not to performed observation. When you tried to think positively while actually observing negatively, hoping for best while expecting worst, the field responded to the deeper observation rather than to surface thoughts. The failures weren't proof that observation doesn't affect reality. They were proof that you can't fool the field with false observation. Your entire history of manifestation and failure to manifest has been quantum field, showing you which observations create which realities. Every success showed you observation patterns that collapse probability waves into desired outcomes. Every failure showed you observation patterns that collapse waves into undesired outcomes. The feedback has been consistent, precise, continuous. You just didn't recognize it as instruction in observer effect because you believed reality was independent of observation. Even your suffering served observer training. Suffering occurs when you observe reality one way while desiring it to be different way. You observe lack while desiring abundance. Observe limitation while desiring freedom. Observe separation while desiring connection. The suffering taught you that split observation creates internal conflict and manifests contradictory reality. This prepared you for recognizing that unified observation, observing what you want rather than what you don't want, collapses probability waves into coherent manifestation. Your spiritual seeking was also observer training, though most teachings don't explain it in these terms. Meditation teaches you to observe without judgment, which is purest form of observation. Visualization teaches you to observe desired reality before it manifests physically. Affirmations teach you to observe through language. All techniques were training different aspects of conscious observation, preparing you for direct understanding of observer effect. The isolation you felt from consensus reality protected your capacity for independent observation. If you'd been completely absorbed in collective observation patterns, you'd have been locked into manifesting consensus reality without ability to observe independently. Your separation preserved your power as individual observer rather than merging you into collective observation that creates and maintains consensus reality. Your questioning of everything mainstream teaches was crucial preparation. Observer effect can't be used consciously if you believe reality is objective and independent. Your doubt about materialist paradigm created opening where truth about observation creating reality could be recognized. The skepticism that seemed to slow your spiritual progress was actually protecting you from accepting limitations as truth. Right now, as you read about observer effect, something is activating in your consciousness. The recognition that you've been creating reality all along without knowing it. That every moment of your existence has been observation manifesting as experience. That you're not witness to reality, but creator of reality through witnessing. Can you feel it? Not as concept, but as recognition, awareness knowing itself as creative force rather than as passive receptor. This recognition is itself observer effect in action. Your observation of yourself as observer is collapsing probability waves around how you understand and relate to reality. You're not learning about observer effect. You're experiencing it directly as you observe yourself reading about it. The experience of reading these words is being created by your observation in this exact moment, manifested from infinite potential into this specific actuality. There's urgency building as you engage with this transmission, and that urgency is accurate perception. Right now, your consciousness is optimally positioned to recognize and harness observer effect consciously. If you dismiss this and return to unconscious observation, you'll continue manifesting randomly based on whatever you happen to observe without realizing you're doing it. The window for recognizing observer power is open now, but won't remain open indefinitely. But here's what makes this moment critical. Recognizing observer effect consciously is irreversible. Once you know that observation creates reality, once you see that consciousness collapses probability waves, once you recognize that attention manifests what it focuses on, you can't unknow it. You can't return to believing reality is independent of observation. The recognition changes everything because it reveals you're not powerless observer, but powerful creator. Not victim of circumstances, but director of circumstances through where you place attention. What I'm about to reveal in the next section is the exact mechanism of how observation creates reality. Why quantum physics proves consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, and how to use observer effect consciously to manifest desired reality rather than randomly manifesting whatever you unconsciously observe. But before that revelation, you must choose. Are you ready to recognize you're creating your reality through observation every moment of every day? 4 years ago, I encountered the double-slit experiment, the quantum physics demonstration that proves observation affects reality at fundamental level. Particles behave as waves when not observed, as particles when observed. The simple act of observation changes physical reality. I intellectually understood the experiment, but didn't grasp its implications for my life until one specific incident forced recognition. I was facing job loss, relationship ending, financial crisis simultaneously, total collapse of external life. In desperation, I decided to test observer effect directly. Instead of observing the problems obsessively like I'd been doing, I consciously withdrew observation from problems and directed it toward desired outcomes. Not visualizing or affirming, just pure observation of reality where problems had resolved, money had appeared, relationship had healed. For 3 days, I maintained this observation despite physical evidence contradicting it. Every time my attention drifted to problems, I consciously redirected it to desired reality. I was observing probability wave where solutions existed rather than probability wave where problems dominated. It felt insane. Reality was clearly showing problems, yet I was observing as if solutions were present. On 4th day, everything shifted simultaneously. Job I thought I'd lost was restored with apology and raise. Relationship that seemed ended reconciled with deeper connection than before. Money appeared through completely unexpected channel that had no logical connection to my situation. The correlation between sustained observation and manifestation was undeniable. I'd collapsed probability waves through 3 days of focused observation, and reality reorganized itself to match what I'd been observing. That experience destroyed my belief in objective reality. I could no longer maintain that circumstances exist independently of observation when I'd just directly experienced reality reorganizing in response to sustained observation. The recognition was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it revealed I'm responsible for everything I experience through what I observe. Liberating because it revealed I have power to change anything by changing what I observe. The next months were disorienting. I started observing consciously all the time, noticing that green lights appeared when I observed them appearing, that parking spots materialized when I observed them being available, that conversations went well when I observed them going well. Small things at first, but consistent enough to prove observation was affecting outcomes. The more I practiced conscious observation, the more obvious the correlation became. The most profound shift was recognizing that I'm not person who observes, I'm consciousness itself, and person is what I'm observing. The observer isn't contained in body or mind. Observer is awareness that body and mind appear in. When I recognized this, Observer effect became effortless because I understood that consciousness observing reality and reality being observed aren't two separate things. They're one process appearing as subject and object. What I'm sharing now is designed to help you recognize what took me years to discover. That you're already using observer effect every moment. That reality is already responding to your observation constantly. That the only difference between conscious and unconscious manifestation is recognizing that observation is creative rather than believing it's passive. You don't need to learn observer effect, you need to recognize you're already doing it. Subscribe to this channel because everything here teaches you to harness observer effect consciously, not through techniques or practices, but through recognition of what's always happening, through awareness of how observation creates reality, through understanding quantum mechanics of consciousness and manifestation. This is quantum reflex, immediate recognition that observation creates rather than passive assumption that observation discovers. Now the revelation that explains why observer effect works and why it's inescapable. Reality doesn't exist until observed because reality is observation. There's no material world existing independently that consciousness observes from outside. There's only consciousness appearing as both observer and observed, creating apparent duality through observation of itself. Observer effect isn't consciousness affecting external reality. It's consciousness creating reality through observing itself. This is what quantum mechanics actually reveals, but most interpretations avoid acknowledging. The wave function that collapses upon observation isn't description of matter behaving strangely. It's description of how consciousness manifests as matter through observation. Before observation, there's no particle, no location, no physical reality, only probability, potential, infinite possibility. Observation collapses potential into actuality, possibility into manifestation, wave function into particle. But here's the shocking part. There's no objective collapse that happens independently of consciousness. The collapse is consciousness observing itself, creating experience of observing something external, when what's actually happening is consciousness appearing as both observer and observed simultaneously. You're not separate observer collapsing external wave functions. Your consciousness collapsing itself from potential into manifestation through process of observing itself. This means observer effect isn't special power some people have. It's how reality works for everyone all the time. Every moment, consciousness is observing and creating experience of observing something. Every perception is consciousness manifesting as perceiver and perceived. Every thought is consciousness appearing as thinker and thought. Every experience is consciousness creating experience of experiencing. There's only consciousness observing itself, manifesting as reality through observation. The practical application is radical. You're not in reality trying to affect it through observation. You are reality, appearing as observer and observed simultaneously. When you observe desired outcome, you're not trying to manifest something external. Your consciousness choosing which aspect of itself to manifest as experience. The manifestation isn't addition of something new. It's consciousness recognizing and actualizing potential that always existed within itself. Here's the practice. Stop trying to observe external reality and recognize your consciousness observing itself. Every time you observe anything, object, person, circumstance, thought, recognize that observer and observed are both consciousness appearing as duality while remaining unified. The observation doesn't affect something external. It creates appearance of something external that's actually consciousness viewing itself. Most revolutionary recognition. This is why observation is so powerful, because there's nothing outside consciousness to resist manifestation. When consciousness observes, it manifests instantly because consciousness and manifestation are one thing appearing as process. The only reason manifestation seems delayed or difficult is because consciousness is observing from perspective of being separate, limited individual, rather than recognizing its infinite consciousness appearing as limited perspective. When you recognize your consciousness observing itself rather than person observing external reality, observer effect becomes effortless. You're not trying to affect something outside yourself. Your consciousness choosing what aspect of itself to experience. And since your consciousness, you have access to all possibilities because all possibilities exist within consciousness as potential waiting to be observed into actuality. Reality is confirming that you're creating through observation by sending signals that prove correlation between your attention and what manifests is too consistent to be coincidental. You've noticed that whatever you focus on expands, not gradually over time, but immediately and obviously. Focus on problems and more problems appear. Focus on solutions and solutions emerge. Focus on lack and scarcity increases. Focus on abundance and resources materialize. The field responds to observation so precisely that it's revealing itself as responsive rather than independent, confirming that observation creates rather than discovers. There's also been the experience of reality seeming to read your mind. You think about something and it appears in conversation, on screen, in circumstances within hours or minutes. This isn't telepathy or synchronicity, it's direct evidence that observation, thinking is form of observation, is manifesting what it focuses on. The field isn't reading your mind is observing potential into manifestation. You've noticed specific pattern. When you make decisions with certainty, circumstances organize to support them. When you make decisions with doubt, obstacles appear. The difference isn't in the decisions themselves, but in the observation quality. Certain observation collapses probability waves toward manifestation. Doubtful observation collapses them toward obstruction. Your observation certainty is literally manifesting support or resistance. Perhaps most striking is how quickly negative spirals occur when you observe negatively. One problem leads to another, which leads to another, creating cascade of difficulties. This isn't bad luck or cursed timing, it's observer effect showing you that negative observation collapses probability waves into manifestations of more negativity. The spiral is your observation creating momentum in direction of what it's focused on. You've also experienced the opposite. When something good happens and you observe with appreciation, more good things follow rapidly. This isn't gratitude attracting abundance, it's your observation of positive collapsing more probability waves toward positive manifestations. The field responds to observation quality by manifesting more of what you're observing. There's urgency in recognizing observer effect consciously because unconscious observation is manifesting constantly. Right now, whatever you're observing most frequently and intensely is being manifested most powerfully. If you're unconsciously observing limitations, fears, problems, you're unconsciously manifesting reality that reflects those observations. The urgency is recognizing you're creating every moment through observation, so you can direct observation consciously rather than letting it run randomly. You might also be noticing that certain thoughts or observations create immediate physical sensations. Anxiety when observing problems, relaxation when observing solutions, excitement when observing possibilities. These sensations are your body responding to probability waves being collapsed by your observation. It's detecting the manifestation occurring at quantum level before it becomes visible at physical level. The synchronicities you've been experiencing aren't coincidences. They're quantum fields showing you how precisely it responds to observation. The more you notice synchronicities, the more they occur. Because observation of synchronicity is collapsing probability waves where more synchronicity exists. You're creating feedback loop where observation of responsiveness manifests more responsiveness. Reality is also showing you that other people respond to what you observe about them. When you observe someone as difficult, they behave difficultly toward you. When you observe them as friendly, they're friendly. This isn't social psychology. It's quantum entanglement, where your observation of them affects their behavior toward you. Because observation collapses, probability waves in their consciousness, as well as yours. Using observer effect consciously requires alignment between what you observe and what you desire, directing observation toward desired reality rather than toward current unwanted reality or feared future reality. Right now, there's likely misalignment. You desire one thing while observing another, want positive outcomes while focusing on negative circumstances, seek abundance while observing lack. Alignment means observing what you want as if it already exists, rather than observing its absence. Not pretending or visualizing, but actual observation. Consciousness focused on probability wave where desired reality exists, collapsing that wave through attention rather than collapsing wave where undesired reality dominates. This is what distinguishes conscious observer from unconscious observer. Conscious observer directs attention deliberately. Unconscious observer lets attention be captured by whatever circumstances or emotions present. Here's the practice. Throughout day, notice what you're observing. Not just physical observation through eyes, but mental observation through thought, emotional observation through feeling, energetic observation through attention. Each form of observation is collapsing probability waves. When you notice you're observing something you don't want to manifest, redirect observation to what you do want to manifest. Not by forcing or resisting current observation, but by gently shifting focus to preferred observation. The challenge isn't observation itself. Observation is natural, effortless, constant. The challenge is directing observation consciously rather than letting it be directed by habit, circumstance, emotion, or other people's observations. Unconscious observation follows whatever's loudest, most emotional, most habitual. Conscious observation follows intention, regardless of what circumstances or emotions suggest you should observe. In the comments, write exactly these words. I am consciousness observing itself into manifestation, creator through observation. This declaration shifts identity from person who observes to consciousness that creates through observing. You're not separate observer trying to affect external reality. You're consciousness creating reality through observation of itself. Write it. I am consciousness observing itself into manifestation, creator through observation. And recognize that writing these words is observer effect in action. You're collapsing probability waves through observation, focused on being conscious observer. When you recognize and harness observer effect consciously, reality reorganizes in ways that prove observation creates manifestation rather than just perceiving pre-existing circumstances. Manifestation becomes immediate because you're no longer waiting for external circumstances to change. You're collapsing probability waves directly through observation. The lag time between desire and manifestation compresses dramatically when you observe desired reality rather than observing absence of desired reality. What used to take months manifests in weeks or days because your observation is directed rather than scattered. Problems become opportunities because you recognize problems only exist when observed as problems. The same situation observed differently collapses into different manifestation. When difficulty arises, instead of observing it as obstacle, observe it as catalyst or teacher or hidden benefit. The situation reorganizes itself to match your observation because observation is what's creating the situation's meaning and trajectory. Anxiety about future decreases dramatically because you recognize future doesn't exist except as probability wave waiting to be collapsed through observation. Instead of observing feared future, which collapses probability toward manifesting it, you observe desired future, which collapses probability toward creating it. The future becomes canvas for observation rather than predetermined fate you're powerless to affect. Relationships improve because you recognize that how you observe people affects how they show up for you. Not through manipulation, but through quantum entanglement, where your observation of them collapses probability waves in their behavior toward you. When you observe someone as trustworthy,